This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And this week, after a lot of requests from you beautiful people, Jonathan is taking a look at the bombastic weaponry of Deep Rock Galactic.
Did I just hear an AC/DC reference? For those about to rock and stone?
For those about to rock and stone.
Instant bonus points if that was an AC/DC reference.
Rock and stone forever!
If you like this kind of content, we've got a brand new season of Loadout airing on the channel right now. New episodes will launch every Sunday, and you could already check out our most recent episode all about gaming's tricky task, tackling the flamethrower. Right, let's take a look at the weapons of Deep Rock Galactic.
Like that!
Strange looking gun with a big cylinder on the side. I suppose the thing that sticks out to me is the stuff that's bleeding through from tactical shooters. There's a hint of a Picatinny rail on top there. I don't know if that's functional. There's also a very strange armature, is that the right word? Some sort of brackety thing that hangs off the front of the magazine well. Not doing very much. Not really sure what that's for. Sort of a space assault rifle, really. That's how I would summarize this in terms of what you might call form factor and role. We've got iron sights embedded in that, what looks like a rail on the top. They look to be almost like two rear sights. It might be my screen. They're very chunky either way. So there's a V-notch in the rear, and what almost looks like another V-notch on the front. I might be wrong about that. They would just about work as sights. They're very close together. That's a problem with bullpup rifles. I'm not convinced this is a bullpup. It's just very short. It just has an action that's closer to the grip than normal. I don't think it's behind it. Yeah, there's more to say about this than you might think. Right, so I think I understand the fictional mechanism of this a little bit better. So that heat shield portion of the gun is coming back from the forward position. There is an ejection port that is mostly exposed behind that looks big enough for the at least for the round to come out, the case to come out of. Problem with that, if this was real, is that's coming back, if not instantly, then pretty near instantly. And that's going to interfere with the case ejection and prevent, very likely, jam the case on its way out, or at the very least interfere with it. Yeah, it's not ideal. There's a reason why ejection port covers spring out the way and stay there. I can't think of a true ejection port cover that stays in place and flaps madly open and closed, which is effectively what this does. So not a sound mechanism. If we were trying to make this for real, you'll be disappointed to hear.
Out a loot bug.
Okay, dual-wielded machine pistols. They're very slow for machine pistols due to the small mass of their bolts or slides. My brain objects on principle to the magazines being angled backwards, but there's something a bit unusual going on with these because the muzzle flash is blue, which is sort of shorthand for space gun, I think. We expect to see a muzzle flash of some sort, and a way to differentiate that from Earth-based weaponry is to make it blue or green. I'm not seeing a button pressed or anything, but there's some clever magazine ejection going on here. Generally speaking, not a great idea. Off the top of my head, there might well be something in the way of the magazine that would stop it from fully ejecting. You want to remove a magazine under control. It does not apply to games. Games love emergency reloads, and in this case, we're getting a dual one, pressing some sort of button and our magazines go flying. It's almost like a shotgun ejector, which is actually a spring-loaded device that kicks your empty case or shell clear of the gun with quite a lot of force. All right, next up, the Thunderhead heavy autocannon. There's a combination here of low poly but high detail, or relatively high detail. Kind of appeals to my nostalgia, the nostalgia center of my brain, I suspect. And there's a lot of not only detail in terms of some texturing, there's a lot of detail in terms of how this weapon is constructed. There are even little wing nuts rendered in low poly graphics on the side of the grip, which is a sort of single spade grip, if that makes sense. Because this is a heavy gun. Almost motorcycle shock absorber struts at the back, which I think are quite visually interesting, even if they might not do very much in practice. What almost looks like an AK safety selector on the right-hand side, which is in the wrong place to do anything, actually. And then the rounds in front of that are so huge that I think that's just a controller of some sort. We probably won't see it operated. In front of that, we have big old coil springs around the barrel. You don't see these on firearms, you see them on light weapons, but heavy cannons, and it says heavy auto. Something like a 20mm cannon, so the Autocannon, for example, has a great big coil spring around the barrel, and that's how it reasserts its barrels back to battery, effectively. And then big cone flash hiders on the front of the barrels. In other words, an awful lot of real firearm features, or light weapon cannon features, depending on what the caliber of this is supposed to be. And I don't think this game gets into named calibers. Some gameplay footage, and this thing lives up to its name. Definitely inspired by twin Oerlikon or Bofors anti-aircraft guns on the deck of a ship or something like that, plugging away at a low rate of fire with a very large projectile designed to contain either a very big armor penetrator or explosive content or some other payload or combination of those, designed to put big holes in aircraft or whatever you care to shoot them at. The round count is a bit high for something of this nature. The gun itself would be astonishingly heavy, and big old 20 to 30mm rounds like that. I guess our player character is smaller than the average person, so I probably shouldn't be trying to scale things too much. But suffice to say, these rounds are big, they are heavy, and you're probably not going to carry, I think it was 100 on the gun. And of course, we have a reserve capacity in our black hole ammo pouch of another 660 rounds, which is a lot. Pretty typical sawn-off shotgun now. Probably the first sawn-off shotgun I've seen with a round counter on it. I mean, I'm not sure how bad at maths you need to be to not be able to count to 2. Even I can manage that, and I'm a museum curator. Just an observation, I suppose. I think it's quite intriguing how the sort of visual language of the shotgun doesn't drift too far from the basic tropes. The cartridge cases are chunky versions of modern red plastic hulled brass headed shotgun cartridges, shotgun shells, whatever you want to call them. And it's kind of amazing how many games, regardless of how far in the future or how sci-fi the setting is, the shotguns will typically feed conventional, ordinary shotgun shells, which date back to the 1850s. I think our brain has to play catch up if ammunition for a shotgun is anything other than that. Even if they change the color from red to something else, I think we subconsciously object. I think that is my half-baked theory on that.
Ethan! Where is that damn tin can?
I think this might be the most interesting gun in the game because of the obvious parallels they're trying to draw with the M1 Garand. It's even called the M1000. So what are the similarities? Well, that's the main one. We've got the ping. We've got a version of the mechanism. It's not bang on the same by any means. There's a weird flip up bit behind the breech that I don't know what that's doing. The cocking handle folds in and out for no obvious reason, like it's locking something in place. That's redundant, you don't need that. There's a hint of M1 other than the feed mechanism with the open top and the closed bolt system, with the drum of the rear sight. So we have an iron sight, aperture iron sight that's with protectors and the drum. So that's all extrapolated from the rear sight on the real gun, I think. It's pretty heavily extrapolated from the Garand, but you know, the more I look, the more I see features. We have got the hint of the gas block at the front and of the gas piston under the barrel, which is what drives this operating rod and therefore the bolt back to do its job. So it's an M1 Garand in space. Insert as many A's in the word space as you wish. Very quick word. The Garand I've chosen is our once converted to fully automatic Garand. This is what's often called the YSL, or Yankee Self-Loader, which is actually an amusing nickname. Apologies to my American friends. A nickname applied by the British at the time, probably a bit jealous, to be honest, of this amazing weapon. to all M1 Garands, but this one the name has stuck because it's specifically referenced in the documentation under that nickname. And thanks to a valued new contact of ours, John Bolland, he has 3D printed for us the missing parts for this that would allow us, in theory, to make it fully automatic again, which is really exciting. And even if we were not to shoot it, we can at least show the missing parts, and we can even install them in the gun. So I'm hoping to, at the very least, install the parts. This is one of them, 3D printed in steel. It's amazing. I feel like I'm living in the future. Thank you, John. Something I missed at first is we've got a bit of a zoom in going on at points, and when there's no scope, but it is, your view is zooming in, and then the gun's firing, or the rifle is firing 2 shots at once. So I don't know if, a bit like Half-Life, maybe the thing under the, no, I don't think there's, I think there's no hole in the what should be the gas tube. So I think it's just somehow loading and firing 2 rounds through the same barrel, which is of course nonsense. Bit of a quirky one, even for this gun. Okay, next gun. I'm just looking at this cold. This says Deepcore 40mm PGL. That tells me that's a grenade launcher. So we have a caliber mention, of course. Kind of looks like some sort of grenade launcher. What all the pipes are all over it, I don't know. I might be about to find out. Double trigger guard. Now, I've criticized game guns for having 2 pointless trigger guards before, and then someone made a real rifle that has double redundant trigger guards that I now can't remember, which is really annoying, but someone did it. So I shouldn't discount things as something that wouldn't happen in reality, because some people do stuff like that. Quite an elaborate looking sighting system. I don't know, I mean, clearly not functional in the game because there are no iron sights functionality wise in the game. Visually, it's a hybrid of grenade launcher like the GM94, or less so an M79, and some sort of recoilless weapon or rocket launcher with that straight through tube without a buttstock on it. It's a little bit distinctive. Right, another great big hip-fired gun here. Triple barreled with a racing structure at the front, which brings to mind there are at least a couple of these triple barreled Gatling guns. Gatling guns famously sort of 6 to 10 barrels, but there are as few as 3 on some. So there's the GAU-19 American machine gun. It's just a 50 cal machine gun, but it has triple barrels to increase rate of fire and deal with heat, which are the 2 main reasons you have a Gatling gun. But I think this is pretty far removed from its source material. Hey, for all I know, they came up with the 3-barreled gun independently of the real ones that do exist.
I need a rocket here!
Quite a visually interesting take on a minigun or a chain gun or a Gatling gun, whatever you want to call it. I don't remember seeing one with visible turning gear wheels. The flat green arm things that sort of lie flat when you pull the trigger and then sort of sit at a weird angle when you don't. I have no idea what those are doing. It almost settles into a slightly underwhelming condition where it's just kind of purring away. But if you watch real miniguns firing long bursts, that's kind of right. They're very impressive, but at the same time, they just kind of sit there purring like a very deadly cat. All right, so when this thing overheats, as most high rate of fire machine guns in games, well, maybe not most, but a lot do, it does look like at least one of those stuck on things on this gun is doing something, and that thing appears to be being a heat sink. Now that's something that per se we don't have on firearms today, but conceivably we might have heat sinks on guns that run at a very high rate and are very big. They would probably be emplaced, and I suspect it's more likely that it'd be some sort of energy weapon, but I'm speculating wildly. That seems to be what that cylinder on top of the gun is doing. It's handling the heat and trying to cool the breeches of the gun down so that it can resume firing safely. Of course, when real guns overheat, they get damaged and stop working. They don't magically fix themselves and carry on working again once you've cooled them down. seen quite a few pistols in games over the years with this, what effectively amounts to a super short barrel. So designers want a magazine in front of the pistol grip. Normally, of course, pistols, self-loading pistols, the magazine goes in the grip. If we look here at the depth of the magazine, if that makes sense, the distance from the front to the back of the magazine, that would dictate the length of the cartridge, which is already too long for the ejection port. So you wouldn't be able to eject even an empty case, let alone a whole round. If you were to chamber that round into that incredibly short barrel, about half the round would be sticking out the front of the gun.
You're cute, but you're dead.
All right, so if we're playing the game of could you make this work, it looks like the empty cartridge cases are just the right size to come out of the ejection port, which makes sense from a design point of view. You would notice if they were not going to physically, if they were going to clip through the side of your model. Now, if the rounds for this, the complete rounds for this, have recessed bullets recessed into the case, as was the case with the Nagant revolver, that would be one way around that. And a way around the apparently super short, impossibly short barrel would be if what looks like the bolt is actually telescoped around the cartridge, which means you would have at least an inch or so of barrel to actually spin your projectile. So I think I can fudge that to work.
The bugs are swarming the radar!
All right, we're into some real sci-fi stuff here with this plasma weapon, with some attractive purple space laser stuff going on. Weirdly enough, despite being the most sci-fi gun I've seen so far, it has several actual Picatinny rails on it, which the other guns haven't had, despite firing conventional ammunition, which is a little bit weird. I have to say, for me, they detract slightly from the sci-fi look of this gun, which is actually pretty creative and sci-fi looking. But as soon as you put present-day attachment systems on something, a little part of my brain objects because I just can't see that being the case. All right, I've noticed a couple more things. So the Picatinny rail is heavily slanted downward, which is a little bizarre considering that it has iron sights mounted on it that you have to, in theory, line up to shoot, but you can't on this. Fortunately for the player, there are no iron sight. There's no iron sight aiming, so it's just a stylistic quibble that I would have there. The rear sight's been raised purely to allow you to have a funky round counter as well. Although this doesn't have conventional ammunition, clearly. This is entirely heat-based, and it took me a while to cotton on here, but there's a tiny little cooling fan behind the round counter that to reload or to sort of enable more rounds to be fired, to be added back to the counter effectively, you sort of poke the fan. I'd have thought maybe detachable ejecting heat sinks or something. We've seen that before. Might be a better way to go, but hey, it's quite fun. Right, big Magnum revolver of a type we've seen many times. This one, probably more than any I can think of, looks a lot like the Nerf Maverick due to the proportions and the great big muzzle weight thing on the end. Break open, which is not a surprise, and the reload is a replaceable cylinder, which not very efficient because of course you're machining up a piece of expensive, complicated piece of metal that's part of the gun, making loads of them and then using those as your feed device. This is why speed loaders exist, because that's not cost effective in any way. I mean, I guess with modern/future technology, you could make cylinders truly interchangeable, drop in, drop out, but traditionally revolvers have to be sort of gunsmith to work properly, to be timed to orientate the cylinder precisely relative to the barrel. Replaceable cylinders kind of mess with that, but doable. It's just wasteful, especially considering these guys are mining for resources. They're effectively throwing away a lot of that. On the face of it, quite a conventional shotgun, albeit you're only pumping it for the first round. It's a self-loading shotgun. It's just that they've made the cocking handle a pump grip for no clear reason. There is in fact a reciprocating cocking handle on the left-hand side that would work just fine. So I don't know why there is a redundant means of cocking it. Having said that, the new next generation squad weapon rifle, the newly renamed XM7, does in fact have 2 cocking handles. So yeah, not strictly necessary. It's the rule of cool, I think. The advantage here is of a semi-automatic shotgun, but you get the cool pump action as well. So that is getting around from the drum magazine into the breech. Weirdly enough, the bolt appears to be behind the magazine. Doesn't make a great deal of sense, unless it's some sort of, well, I suppose the Maxim machine gun sort of works that way, in that it pulls around backward out of the belt and then forward into the action. But even then, it's not quite the same thing. So surprisingly, there's actually a bit to talk about on this.
Sticky and gooey.
Right, that's pretty interesting. To me, that seems like a sort of take on a flamethrower in a weird sort of way, although it's firing, or shooting, I should say, not firing, blobs of acid goo, which look pretty cool, and fizz away on contact with things. It's sort of, I think, filling the niche that would otherwise be occupied by a flamethrower. So you'd have a continuous burst. But that was my first impression. Obviously, I can't say much about how it's operating. It's essentially a pressurized tank of something. We're recharging it with sort of canisters, and it has the other reason I mentioned flamethrowers is it has the sort of stick and burn quality of a more realistic take on a flamethrower, even though this thing is not at all realistic and is not a flamethrower. Contradiction in terms here slightly. We have something described as a smart rifle, so I assume the electronics are not just decoration on this one. I think they're going to do something. But the contradiction is that it's called a rifle, but it's in a submachine gun class, if I understand this correctly. And sure enough, that magazine is containing pistol-sized conventional rounds with, as we've seen before in this game, a weird sort of bracket supporting the magazine for no apparent reason, unless that is effectively your magazine catch. Let's have a look. That's really cool. That takes the sort of lock-on technology of or at least fictional lock-on technology of a typical rocket launcher and applies it to a submachine gun. I suppose it's not a million miles away from game depictions of the Aliens smart gun, but that will only sort of lock onto, or soft lock or whatever, onto one target at a time. All the versions I played do anyway, whereas this is engaging multiple targets and giving you visual indicators of what it's locked onto and what's going to get hit by bullets. That's a really fun sci-fi take on a guided weapon. That's being enabled by some sort of, I thought it was a laser, but it's some kind of a sensor that sits on top of the gun. This is technology that exists, but not on rounds this small. So about 10 years ago now, the American DARPA organization released footage of a steerable 50 caliber bullet that I think worked using inflatable bladders effectively on its surface that altered the airflow and steered the bullet in flight. So the idea of steerable projectiles is plausible. Miniaturizing that technology down to a pistol round, I'm not sure that would ever be possible. Or by the time we could do that, we could probably do energy weapons that are portable. If you'd like to support us here at the Royal Armouries, I think you know the drill by now. Head over to our website or to our social media platforms. We do have, quite excitingly, a real-life event, which is the 11th of March. We have a date now. I'm not quite sure when tickets are going up for sale, but please do keep an eye out, on the website, our social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we'll be doing a version of our What Is This Weapon YouTube series, but in a sort of live setting. Hope to see you there, guys. If not, we'll see you again next time.